if Kirk Cousins doesn't win a Super Bowl with the Vikings, was that contract, was the move to get Kirk Cousins a failure for the Vikings?
Yes, that's a failure. And it's large in part because of how much money they spent on Kirk Cousins. So they signed him in free agency to a 3-year, $84 million contract.
Fully guaranteed.
Yeah, fully guaranteed. So whether that money is going to Kirk Cousins, no matter what, and there's no way out of it in that contract. And so if you don't win a Super Bowl with him, you basically took 3 years and kind of threw it down the drain because you invested in somebody who's done no more for you than Case Keenum.
Yeah, Case Keenum, their old quarterback, took him to the playoffs. Kirk Cousins couldn't even do that.
Not at all.
And I think you signed Kirk Cousins to that amount of money with the understanding he will be the difference for us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't. Kirk Cousins, we've hit a ceiling with Case Keenum. We believe Kirk Cousins puts us over the hump and will help us win more, and it didn't work.
Didn't work at all.
And I think the problem with the Vikings, it's interesting. Going into last season, everyone was really high on them. Mm-hmm. They're a Super Bowl team. They're going to be great. And I said, whoa, slow down. The Vikings hired a new offensive coordinator, John DeFilippo, this season. This was his first year.
Right.
And I said, it's going to take him 1 year to learn and gel with each other. Mm-hmm. Year 2 will be better. And the problem is they fired him at the end of the year. They fired John DeFilippo.
Right.
It was actually mid-season. And they basically wasted a year with Kirk Cousins. You didn't get any more better. You didn't build enough rapport with a new offensive coordinator. So now you got to restart that whole process next year. You have 2 years left with Kirk Cousins, 2 years to learn and build rapport. And I thought year 3 was like the best chance of the Vikings to win a Super Bowl.
Right.
Again, you're just restarting that process of getting to know each other in a new system. It's not good. It's ugly.
Yeah. Thankfully, they have a good core in terms of receiving. They've got some talented players. On the defense, I think they have an excellent defense led by Harrison. But on offense, you have Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, 2 of the best receivers in the league, arguably.
You love Stephon Diggs.
Love Stephon Diggs.
Why?
He's an excellent route runner.
Yep.
He every single route he runs is sharp, it's crisp, it's violent, and the defender just never has a chance. He's just too quick.
You're higher on him than most people I know. It's interesting.
People don't understand. Like when he was at Maryland, he was absolutely shredding people. Like Stephon Diggs is so good. And I think that was highlighted at the beginning of the year, when you had Thielen and Diggs, Cousins, and Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
They were on top of the world offensively. Like Diggs and Thielen's they both had pretty much 2 touchdowns a game. And I'm mad because I traded away Stephon Diggs. I made him a draft pick.
In fantasy.
I am so sorry that I traded you away. If I could do anything to bring you back, I would.
Well, I think it's interesting. The Vikings fired their offensive coordinator because their running game wasn't efficient enough. Which is weird because Dalvin Cook got hurt.
Right.
And they said that we weren't running the ball enough. Their head coach, Mike Zimmer, is an old defensive-minded guy. Said, I want to establish the running game.
Right.
And he didn't feel like John DeFilippo was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. I don't understand. You lost your running back. Like we talked about this. You had this 3. You called it the running game triangle.
Yeah.
What are the 3 things you think you need to have a great running back?
In my opinion,
running game.
3 things you need for a great running game. Or you need at least 2 of them. You need to have
2 of the 3.
2 of the 3, right? So you have a great run game scheme or a great run game coordinator, somebody who's going to get you the right matchups.
So play calling.
Right, play calling, scheming. You have a very talented running back.
Yep.
And then you have a great offensive line. And if you can get 2 of those, you'll have a successful running game. So if you have a great scheme and a great running back, but your offensive line isn't as great, because of the scheme and the talent of the running back, you're going to get positive yards. My best example is the Steelers. Steelers don't have the world's greatest offensive line, but they've got a great scheme playing behind Ben Roethlisberger, and they've got Le'Veon Bell, arguably the best running back in the league, most valuable. And that scheme shows because they had James Conner as the backup this year, and they still found success in the run game very early up until he got injured. You have a great line and a great scheme. That speaks for itself. If you have a great line and a great scheme, you're going to run the ball well. There's no question about it.
Doesn't matter who's that running back.
It doesn't matter unless you have a brick for a running back.
Who doesn't understand how to read holes and where to go.
I think one of the most famous examples of that is Emmitt Smith playing behind that Dallas Cowboys offensive line because he hardly got touched until he was at the second level.
Yeah.
And then if you have a great offensive line and a great running back, but your scheme isn't as great, your offensive line is going to get movement based off of talent. And if you have a great running back who can, read that movement, you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting. I think they kind of pulled the trigger too early on John DeFilippo. I would have liked to see him get more time and really develop more of a relationship with Kirk Cousins. Mm-hmm. I think we also have to decide if it's a failure with the Minnesota Vikings, we have to decide, do we believe in Kirk Cousins? And I don't know that I do. A lot of the times people say, this guy can't win a big game. And I think we overuse that term. I think it's kind of ridiculous. However, I listened to Max Brown, a former USC quarterback, talk about this, saying that in big moments or like even at practice, he got really tense. Like psychologically, he really amped it up. And he felt like every practice was a Super Bowl for him. I think Kirk Cousins is very similar, where he legitimately in bigger moments doesn't get easy going and relax. Like sometimes for me, my personal experience, I was always way too tense early in games. Before halftime in the fourth quarter, for whatever reason, I had nothing to lose and it slowed down for me. Like I was able to relax finally.
Right.
I think Kirk Cousins does the opposite. In big moments, he tenses up. In big games, he tenses up and isn't as successful. And it's a psychological problem he has. And I don't believe in Kirk Cousins in big. I think there's a stat. I don't know the stats. I wish I did. It's fine that we don't need to look it up. But he's not as successful against teams with winning records. He's not as successful in primetime games. He's not as successful in big time moments because it's a psychological thing. He tenses up. And so I don't know that I believe in Kirk Cousins to turn it around and do well for the Vikings. And I do think if I had to make a prediction whether the contract was a failure or not, yeah, I think it was because I don't believe in Kirk.
I think him being in Washington, playing behind RG3 for a couple of years, and then I had Jay Gruden as a head coach.
Yep. Kyle Shanahan as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, I believe, both.
Yeah, both of them were there at one point. And if you look at his best years, it was under Kyle Shanahan.
Yep.
Like that big year where Washington was like, whoa, like this, we had like the 70+% completion percentage, was playing out of his mind. When you have a coach like Shanahan, it completely changes the way you play because he understands your strengths and he's going to use your strengths in the best way he possibly can. And the great example of that is just at the 49ers and what he did with the Falcons with Matt Ryan. That's why those teams have been successful in quarterback play, because there's sometimes coaches that just can't, like they understand offenses and they understand their quarterback better than others. And Shanahan does that well, and McVay does that well.
Do you think I'm onto something with big games?
With big games?
Like with Kirk Cousins, do you think he can win a playoff game? Can he win a big game?
I think he can win a playoff game. I just think he needs to have more confidence in himself and the players around him.
You think it's a psychological issue?
I'm not sure if it's like a giant...
I don't know his head. I don't want to assume I don't know who he is, but...
I don't want to say like a giant psychological issue, but I think the teams he's probably played in those primetime games, those are good teams. The teams that he plays in the playoffs, they're in the playoffs for a reason type deal. So it's not always hanging on him, because really with Washington, he didn't have a great roster around him.
I'll point to this. In the Vikings season last year, they played the Bears in a big moment. Later in the year, the Bears are leading the division. They needed to win this game to stay alive in the playoff hunt. In the fourth quarter, Kirk Cousins threw the game-closing interception. He threw a pick six that gave the Bears a 2-score lead and really iced the game for the Vikings. And it's plays like that when in the moment, when the bright lights are on, you need Kirk Cousins to make a play. He hasn't. Repeatedly, he hasn't.
Tom Brady threw a ball too high to Rob Gronkowski, which was an easy dump off, and got bailed out by an offsides. Sure. I don't remember the interception and how egregious it was.
Sure, but you can find examples of a guy not succeeding, but you can also find a lot of examples where Tom Brady's pulled it through.
Yeah, obviously.
I can't think of any examples where Kirk Cousins has pulled it through in the big moment.
That's a good point.
Sorry, like I love Kirk. He's a great guy. He's one of my favorite NFL players. I don't believe in him long term. Yeah. If you had to make a prediction, will it work or not? Do you think was the money they gave Kirk Cousins a success or a failure? What do you predict?
I think they're gonna see success because they're just such a talented roster. But as far as winning a Super Bowl goes, there's a lot of young teams and a lot of talented teams. You're gonna have the Patriots there.
The NFC conference in general is just.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have your Patriots. The Eagles are going to be great. I don't know how they made the playoffs this year with all the injuries, but Doug Peterson's an excellent coach. You're still dealing with the Rams. You're going to be dealing with the Saints. Cowboys, I think, are going to do better. How much better, we don't know. We talked about that earlier in the segment.
Yeah.
There's just going to be other teams, I think, that are still going to ultimately be better than the Vikings. And so you throw that in the mix with, is Kirk great in great games? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, I hate doing this. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I really don't like self-promotion. It makes me feel like a used car salesman, but I got to do it. So if you don't know, this is my podcast, Strong Opinion Sports. It's my favorite thing in the world. And you can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud. You can find it on YouTube. You can find the full entire hour-long podcast on YouTube. You can also find shorter breakout clips like the one you just watched. please do me a favor. If you like anything I had to say, maybe you hate me and you're mad about something, share this podcast with your friends. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you want to do. Help me grow by telling your friends about this show.